Good afternoon and welcome back to Tactics Board. Today we're previewing Norwich City's return to Championship action after the international break, and they take on Stoke City at Carrow Road. I think it's a chance for the Canaries to really prove their mettle after an interesting start to the season. Of course, 4 games unbeaten, and then that rather deflating loss to Rotherham United at the New York Stadium that twinned with Josh Sargent's injury the week earlier against Huddersfield. Felt like it put a bit of a dampener on what had been a really positive opening chapter to the campaign. But speaking to fans outside the New York Stadium, there still seems to be a belief that the signs shown in that first 4 games can be reproduced across the season, and that they weren't just signs of momentum, but that they were signs of a good team that could go on and achieve big things in the Championship. So we're going to get stuck into how I think the game against Stoke is going to pan out tactically. I'm going to give you my predicted 11 for what I think David Wagner will choose as well. Of course, he now has 2 very fresh options in Danny Batth and Hwang, who were both signed incredibly late on deadline day, and me and Connor know that very well from having stayed up to report on it. But yeah, they should be available for the first time, having missed out on registration for the Rotherham game, and it gives Wagner two very different options to what he's already got, and I'm going to get stuck into whether I think they'll start. So without further ado, this is the team I think David Wagner will pick to face Stoke in NR1. So I've gone with Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson at centre back, Dimitris Yunidis at left back, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean in the middle of midfield, Johnny Rowe on the left hand side, Christian Fasnacht on the right, with Ashley Barnes and Adam Eder up front. And you'll notice that's unchanged from the Rotherham game, which may seem strange given it was the first defeat of the season, but I think there are enough players in there who have impressed in enough games not to be dropped. And you look at the likes of Gabriel Sara, Kenny McLean, Shane Duffy, and maybe they didn't have their best games, but given what they've produced already, it would be so harsh to drop them. And I also think, just squad-wise, I'm not sure Wagner has the options to go and do that. So to just take it from the back, I've got Angus Gunn, who, I think it's quite clear will start henceforth unless he starts making a serious number of errors consecutively. With Tim Krul now out of the building, I think it's fair to say the competition has decreased a little bit. Of course, George Long has come in and actually looked quite good in that win over Bristol City in the Carabao Cup. But I think for now, at least, he's going to be quite a clear number 2 playing in the cup competitions. Of course, Norwich are still in that Carabao Cup and they've got the FA Cup to come up. So a few chances probably to come for George Long, but I think the gap between him and Angus Gunn is very large at the moment. Jack Stacey at right back can't really be disputed. Of course, Kellen Fisher has impressed, but Stacey's start to life in a Norwich shirt has been fantastic, and he does suit that Wagner system very well. Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson, I considered maybe throwing Danny Bart in there because neither of these had especially good games in that Rotherham fixture, but Shane Duffy, by all accounts, impressed for Ireland. David Wagner really talked him up in a big way in the press conference before the Rotherham game and said how pleased he was for him to get that call up. Ben Gibson was more the one I was looking at, and Bart started on the left-hand side of Sunderland's defence most of the time last season, so that seems like it would be a natural progression at some point, but I'm not sure Gibson was poor enough against Rotherham, although admittedly he didn't have his best game and neither did anybody else in a Norwich shirt. I don't think he was poor enough to be dropped, and he will receive a lot of criticism this season, and he will probably get Norwich fans a little bit nervous, and I would be very surprised if he sees this through all the way through the season with Bart now brought in and Grant Hanley to come back from injury. I would be surprised if Gibson remains in that duo for the whole of the season, but right now I actually think he's been quite good and under the radar has impressed me. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't start, although Bart probably will have a little bit of a say in things before long. And then I've got Yunidis at left back. The only reason for me why that would be disputed would be if his sort of fitness or readiness is called into question by the international situation. Of course, he played for Greece as a substitute on Tuesday. He will have had to fly back. Obviously got himself to Colney and trained before this game, so there won't be too many training minutes in the legs before it, but he suits Wagner's system again so well, and him and Stacey have both had very good starts to the season, so I'd be surprised if he's dropped. Sarah and McLean, do I need to say, anymore. Again, there's a little bit of an international situation involved with McLean, but he wasn't too far away. Obviously only in Scotland, so there won't be any chance of any jet lag or anything like that, any long-term effects from that. And he didn't even play in that loss to England on Tuesday, so I'd be surprised if he was especially affected by that. And him and Sarah have just been absolutely fantastic. Without having seen every other championship game, I think it's probably safe to say that they've been the best midfield. Obviously, Sarah picked up that Championship Player of the Month award in the international break. He'll be very pleased with that, and it's just a vindication, I think, of the form that he's showed since he arrived at Norwich. And he was quite inconsistent last season, but so far he's performed in nearly every game. I think he tailed off a little bit from those last few games. I don't know if somebody had a word with the deadline day approaching, but Norwich have managed to keep hold of him for this window at least, and that could be massive for them. So he'll definitely start. I've got him and McLean in midfield. Christian Fastnacht on the right, I think it's kind of one of them strange ones now where people are saying he's been underrated, but there are so many people saying that. I'm not sure it's true anymore. I think he is an understated player who lends himself to going under the radar, but I think a lot of Norwich fans have now picked up on the fact that technically he's a very, very good player and looks like a very good buy. On the left-hand side, you've got Johnny Rowe, who's been away with England under-20s. I think they only had one game last Thursday, so he shouldn't really have too many issues. He looks like he's really enjoying it, and I think he actually posted on social media about how much he was enjoying that time in the England youth setup. It's excellent for him to get the recognition for what he's done. I know the characters behind the scenes are still very, very keen to keep him grounded and not to give him too young, but that contract will certainly be being reviewed. I think he's up in 2025, and he looks like he could be a key player for Norwich this season. So I'd be very surprised, having got an assist in that Rotherham game and then gone away on international duty, if he wasn't on the left wing for this game. And up front, I think that was where there was the biggest decision to make for me, because Adam Eder was really poor in that Rotherham loss. And so was Ashley Barnes, to be honest. I know he's got a lot of plaudits, and I've almost become a fan of his, to be honest. I wasn't expecting to like him in the way that I have. I wasn't expecting to see so many technical aspects to his game, but he's looked really, really good. And I think that Rotherham game was just a day off for him, and he didn't have the support around him that he needed. But that's where that Eder conversation comes in, and Norwich really needed somebody to stretch the play so that Rotherham's press, which was so aggressive, was stretched out a little bit. But because Eder was so stuck in his own half, really, and didn't really stretch that back line much, Rotherham could just camp almost their whole team in the Norwich half and made it more difficult for Norwich to pass out than they'd like. They do want that press to come onto them so that they can pass through it, and they do back themselves to do that. But Rotherham's was just too strong for them, and they needed Eder to help them relieve some pressure further up the pitch, and he couldn't do that. So if we had just gone straight from Rotherham, Hwang Yu-jo had had a week to train with Norwich, and then they'd had a game on the Saturday, I'd probably be backing Hwang to start this game. But he's been away on international duty, Eder's been away on international duty, and it looks like Hwang is actually only going to have a couple of days to embed Wagner's philosophy and thoughts and tactics into him before that game, and I think it might just come a little bit too early for him. Eder obviously scored for the Republic of Ireland while he was away, scored a penalty against the Netherlands, and by all accounts terrorised Virgil van Dijk, which wasn't a sentence I was expecting to say when we went into the international break, but he's had a very good one himself, and I think David Wagner will recognise that and probably just be a little bit reluctant, because we know how important those tactics are to him and having players who can fit into that setup, and I don't think Hwang will have had enough time. But I'd be very surprised if we don't see him in some sort of form off the bench, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in a Norwich shirt. But now we're going to come on to Stoke and how I think Norwich might cope with them and how things might go with that. And I think it's something that, probably having seen Alex Neil's teams for a couple of years at Carrow Road, Norwich fans will know what to expect. They'll come and they'll press aggressively and they'll put Norwich under the cosh, and much like Rotherham, they'll come and try and employ a similar game plan, I think. Alex Neil's Sunderland last season, although it wasn't by about a day or so because he'd left for Stoke, gave Norwich a real tough test, and they would have been prepared for that game by Neil. They would have obviously built up his philosophy over their time under him, and they really put Norwich through it at the Stadium of Light. Obviously won 1-0 under later on in the season as well, but I think this was more an indication of what an Alex Neil team looks like, and that's what I'd expect to see from it. Lots of pressing, lots of aggression, and Stoke have made some fantastic signings this summer. It's really gone under the radar quite how much work they've done, because the volume of signings they've made is unbelievable this summer, really. So it will be a different one to what Norwich are used to seeing from the Potters, but they'll come and put Norwich under real pressure, and that's where there really is an onus on Adam Eder to do what he didn't do against Rotherham and stretch that play, because Norwich want that press, but they want some space to operate in once they've made that first pass, and in order to separate out the lines that Stoke have, they need Eder to push that defensive line back. Then obviously the midfield doesn't want to be too disparate from the defence. They will drop back a little bit, and then the gap between them and the aggressive strikers opens up as well. So Eder's movement is going to be absolutely crucial, and just the movement of the Norwich team generally as well, and their quality playing through, because this is the sort of team that you make mistakes against. This is the sort of team that wants to steal the ball in your own half and on the edge of the box and create chances that way, and they're very good at it. They've had a good start to the season, they've signed some good players, and I think this is going to be a real test of where Norwich are at this time in the season. I think you put this together with the game against Leicester, who are obviously very big promotion favourites, although they haven't looked especially impressive. Little bit similar to Norwich last season at the start, maybe. But you put those two games together, and this could be a really difficult few days for them. So if they come through it with an impressive couple of performances, hopefully a good amount of points, then I think Norwich fans will be really satisfied that their team could make a Championship promotion push this season. But that's where we'll end Tactics Board. There'll be plenty of other preview stuff across our channels, of course. David Wagner's press conference is this afternoon, or early evening, if you will. It kicks off at 5, so get across our channels for live updates from that, and we'll have the video from that, the full video, as quickly as we can. So get onto the YouTube channel, sign up for Pinken Plus. You can do that at pinken.com/subscribe. $1.99 for the first 2 months, and then $2.99 thereafter, which I think is fantastic value still. We've got an exclusive interview with Narcis Pelak across our channels at the moment, and he spoke really well, so I'd encourage you to go and read that, go and watch that, and thank you for watching this, and I'll see you on Tactics Board again very soon, with obviously the next league game against Leicester next Tuesday.